Well, this is the part 3 or the last part of the relativistic quantum mechanics. So in the part 2 of this relativistic quantum mechanics, we have seen that Dirac equation actually represents spin half particles, or it describes the dynamics of fermions, and we discussed the spin operators and the helicity operators and the helicity spinors. So here let us discuss the Lorentz transformation properties of the Dirac spinors. So first check the transformation rule under the rotation. So again, for simplicity, let us consider that this particle momentum is along the z direction only. So px py is equal to 0 and pz is equal to p. Now you rotate the coordinate by an angle theta about the x-axis. So the momentum of the rotated coordinates, or momentum in the rotated coordinates, you can write that px prime is equal to px is equal to 0, but py and pz they will change, and py prime is just sine theta p and pz prime is equal to cos theta of p. So this is a simple transformation property of a vector under rotation that you see, because this is px, py, pz are the vectors. So you assume that under this rotation, that phi plus, this is the helicity, positive helicity eigenstate or eigenfunction, that goes to say phi plus prime. Okay. So in the rotated coordinate system, I can write that this phi plus prime should satisfy this equation. So if you just remove this prime from this equation, you have the equation for the positive helicity state in the original frame. So once you actually rotate, you are basically describing the same helicity state in a different coordinate system. So they will actually satisfy the same helicity equation in the new coordinate system. So now if we assume that, okay, this phi plus prime is written as two component A and B, and then you just solve this equation, right? So I know what is this P prime, I know what is sigma matrix, and I assume that A and B, and I get some solution. Similarly, I can write the equation for negative helicity state, okay? And when I combine these two solutions, I can write that this phi actually transform like this. So this is the general formula for phi plus or phi minus. I can actually have the same formula. Okay. So this actually gives you this transformational property of the Dirac spinor under rotation. So here you note that this angle sitting here is not theta, but it is theta by 2, and you have this sigma x matrix. So when you have rotation about the x-axis. So if you have any rotation about any arbitrary axis, you can generalize this definition to this. So if you have rotation about some n vector, then I can write this rotation operator for phi as this sigma dot n theta by 2 phi. Right. So you can see that this is a well-defined transformation rule, but it is not exactly the transformation rule for vector. Okay. So it has a different transformational property. That is why it is not vector. That is why it is called spinor, because it is actually represent the spin half particle which has a particular definite transformation rule under the Lorentz transformation. Okay. So here this is the rule for transformation under the rotation, okay, and which is different from scalar and vector. That is why it has a different name. Now if we consider the transformation under boost, so in that case, let this particle is at rest in say S frame and has a momentum say px prime and energy E prime with respect to another frame say S prime. So basically we assume that S prime frame, so you have a S frame where this particle is at rest and another frame is moving away from S frame with some velocity minus Vx 0, 0. So it is actually moving along the x direction. So you know that if we just consider that how this 4 vector p mu, okay, So basically time and space. So under boost, time and space mix up. So how this p mu, which is a 4 vector that transformed. So basically this is the time component and this is the space component of this vector. Since we are actually having boost along x-axis, only this x component changes and other components don't change. Where you have written this zeta is actually, or the xi is actually px prime by e prime. Okay. So you can think that boost is a rotation operator of imaginary angle. So in the rest frame, we can write this phi as this 1, 0 or this omega like this. We just choose one such solution. Right. Now in the S prime frame, where this momentum is non-zero, so in the S frame, P was 0, so this lower component was 0. Now in the S prime frame, since P vector is not 0, so I have this Px prime because that component is non-zero. So this is the vector of omega prime in the S prime frame. So this sigma x, when acts on this 1, 0, it actually becomes 0, 1. So I can actually write like this. So now I need to find one transformation which actually bring this omega to this omega. Right? So you can immediately see that this upper component is phi and this is a chi. So this is phi component and chi component. And this phi and chi have different energy and momentum dependence. And so they transform differently under boost. So I need to have some operator which will actually act differently on phi and chi and also couple these two things, because depending on this phi, what will be this chi here, that depends on what is phi here. Okay. So this transformation between these two will actually couple this phi and chi. So this transformation under boost you can actually write like this, where this alpha x is given by sigma 0, sigma x 0. So here I have not gone through all these mathematical details that you can see in any books. In a book you can find it. So this is basically the transformation rule for omega under boost. So if you have actually boost in arbitrary directions, so that v vector actually defines that direction in which way you have this boost, then you can actually write this general formula for omega and omega prime. So this is the general rule or the transformation rule of omega under the boost operation. Again, it is different from a vector, right? So basically, this omega has a typical transformation rule under rotation and boost. So under Lorentz transformation, omega has a specific or a definite transformation rule which is different from the vector. So you cannot just write that omega is a 4-component vector. It is not exactly the vector under the Lorentz transformation, right? So it is called spinor. So here basically this positive and negative energy spinors, you have some particular notation that you will see in many books. So for here, for positive energy, I assume that this E is always a positive quantity, is defined like this. And in the Dirac equation, if you just write the Dirac equation in the momentum space, so this P0C is the energy. So positive energy solution, this E is equal to P0C is greater than 0. And we can write this Dirac equation like this, where this N is the normalization constant. And this S I put because of this two spin possibilities that I have. Okay, so phi 1 and phi 2 that we wrote before, or phi up and phi down. And then you use the normalization condition that omega dagger omega is equal to twice of E. Then you can write this normalized spinor. So this normalization constant you just determine from there. And you actually write this in the standard notation of U. So this is the standard notation for positive energy spinor that you use. And this complete wave solution, then basically this plane wave solution is U e to the power ip dot x h cross. Okay. And this P is actually E by C. This is a positive energy and P is the momentum. So similarly, I can write down this for the negative energy solution. When this P0C is a negative quantity, that I write as minus E less than 0. Now if you just have the similar equation, you do the same exercise. But here you note that I write phi in terms of chi. Because if I want to write chi in terms of phi, I will have E minus mc square here. So when E is equal to mc square, that diverges. So I cannot write like that. So here, so when for positive energy solutions, when I wrote chi in terms of phi, I got a positive definite quantity here, which is never 0. So similarly for negative energy solution, I convert such a way that this denominator never goes to 0. And then I write this omega with minus E and vector P, so momentum P, and this spin index S like this. Okay. So now what you do is basically you change the direction of this momentum also, this 3 momentum. So you make this P vector is equal to minus P. So now if P goes to minus P and energy is already negative, so all the components of this momentum are now negative. So initially whatever this 4 momentum I had, I am just going to the negative of that 4 momentum. So I write this omega minus C and minus P by just replacing this P, so this minus sign goes away. And this N is again the normalization constant. And again you use the same normalization condition that omega dagger omega is equal to twice E. And then I write this V, P and S like this, where this momentum is actually the opposite of this original initial momentum. But that, whatever that is, it is opposite to that. And whatever is actually P coming here is actually here, it comes there. And the complete plane wave solution then I can write as V, Ps, and then e to the power minus I. Now P minus, basically this P minus is the negative all these things, that momentum that I have. So minus E and minus P. And this minus, so P minus is actually minus of this, so you can write as minus of P mu. So basically this I can write it to I plus I P dot X. So for negative positive energy solutions, this plane wave solution I have, so for positive energy solution e to the power, I have e to the power minus IPX dot H cross, but for negative energy solutions I have e to the power plus IPX dot H cross, because this momentum is now reversed. So these are the standard spinors or the solutions that you will see in books. Now here actually you have written this negative energy spinors, but how to interpret these negative energy solutions? How to get the stability in the spectrum? So that question now we have to answer. So now what Dirac did, so we will actually use this Dirac interpretation for negative energy states. As I mentioned that negative energy states are valid solution like KG equations, Klein-Gordon equations, and that is actually creating problem, and it will actually make this spectrum unbounded from below. So to resolve this problem, what Dirac did, basically that is the master class of Dirac. He said that okay, you see that vacuum is or the normal ground state or vacuum is that where there is no positive energy particle, because any free particle actually comes with positive energy. So there is no such free particles there, but all the negative energy states are completely filled up. So there is no vacancy there. Okay, so that is called the Dirac sea. So all the towers of negative energy states, they are completely filled up. Okay, and since you describe this Dirac equation describes fermions, according to Pauli exclusion principle, each energy state can have only two such particles. One is spin up and spin down. Okay, and there cannot be any third particle in that same energy level. So once you actually fill up with all these two different spin states, so all the negative energy states are filled up, then no positive energy state can actually jump there. That is forbidden by the Pauli exclusion principle. So the positive energy particle will remain there. So there is no problem with the stability. But then why don't we see all these negative energy particles? Because all the observables that we actually see or whatever we measure, these are all excitations on top of the vacuum. We never measure the vacuum. We always measure what is actually happening on top of that. So there is no problem because we cannot see them. We cannot measure them. So let us see one is such schematic diagram here. So this is basically energy is 0. So these are the all positive energy states or positive energy levels that you can have. So minimum positive energy is plus mc square and the maximum negative energy is minus mc square, and then for any momentum you have these towers of states up to minus infinity. So Dirac says that all these states are filled up. So in each state you have two, for example, since this is Fermion, let us assume that we are talking about electrons. So all these states will be filled up by one spin up electron and another spin down electron. So each state are actually filled up with these two electrons. So each state has two such particles sitting there. Okay. So this is called actually the Dirac sea. Okay. So this sea is filled up, and whatever you actually measure is the excitation on top of this. So if any particle actually jumps here, we see that there is a particle, and we measure its momentum and energy and all these things. But we can never actually see this thing. Okay. These are not accessible to us or in experiment. Now, what happens if I say that in some means, say I excite one electron sitting here and actually I kick it out from there. So what will happen? So if there is one vacant place. So imagine that one electron, so with say spin up and energy say minus E for this energy level is removed from the Dirac sea. So it will create a hole here. So that is this hole indicated in this figure. Now what is the energy of this hole? So basically when you say that this is the vacuum, and vacuum has no energy, no charge, no spin. So we define this vacuum as the zero energy state. Okay. So when this label was filled up with this electron, then I had vacuum, right? All the states were filled up, that is the vacuum. And then I had zero energy. Now I removed one negative energy. So what is the energy of this hole? Because that energy of that hole plus the energy of that electron was giving me 0. So the energy of the hole is the negative of that negative energy, so this is positive energy. Now what is the charge of this hole? Since the vacuum was also chargeless, so the whole charge of the hole has to be the negative of the charge of the electron. So minus or minus E, this is basically plus E charge, right? And what is the spin? Since again spin was 0 for the vacuum, so spin of the hole has to be negative of the spin of the electron. So if initially I assume that the electron was spin up, then the hole has spin down. If the electron had spin down, then the hole should have the spin up. So basically what does it mean? That absence of a negative energy electron from the Dirac sea is equivalent to say that I have a positive energy, positively charged and opposite spin particle that is called hole in the sea. So the statement is that absence of a negative energy electron is equal to or equivalent to presence of a positive energy, positively charged hole with opposite spin. So basically this hole represent the antiparticle of electron. So that is positron. Okay. So to give the stability of this positive energy particle, Dirac has to introduce the concept of antiparticle. So that is the success of his theory. So basically negative energy was the drawback of Klein-Gordon equation, and it was also initially the drawback of Dirac equation, but Dirac converted that drawback into his success. So he introduced a new concept of antiparticle. And few years later, at that time, positron was not discovered. So people did not know about the antiparticle of electron. But Dirac predicted that there should be a antiparticle of electron. So few years later, Anderson actually discovered positron and got Nobel for that. So that is basically the magic of Dirac equation. You can say that he just started to overcome the difficulties in the Klein-Gordon equation, and he linearized the equation in time derivative. And then the equation he developed actually described spin half particular fermions, so it becomes the equation for fermions. And he introduced the concept of antiparticles. Okay. So to describe a single particle, say single stable particle, I should say if you want to describe a single positive energy electron, Dirac required to introduce infinite number of particles, because all this Dirac C that is actually here, you have infinite number of particles actually occupying all these states, because this energy levels goes up to minus infinity. So to describe a single positive energy particle, Dirac required to introduce in his theory infinite number of particles in the negative energy states, or in terms of Dirac C. So you may say that, okay, then this theory is not a single particle theory. You will require many particles. And now if we assume that from this Dirac C, I just remove one electron from this state and bring it to this positive energy. So I will see a positive energy electron. So that will be a physical particle. But when actually I just excite that negative energy electron to the positive energy state, immediately I create a hole here, which is actually a positively charged positive energy particle. So I cannot just create one electron, I have to always create a positron here. So this hole is actually a positron. So from vacuum, I cannot create just a single electron. I have to create a electron-positron pair. So this is basically correspond to this electron-positron pair creation. And creation of particles or destruction of particles are actually best described in quantum field theory, not in quantum mechanics. And this many particle dynamics, they are not actually well described by quantum mechanics. So basically, Dirac equation suggests that rather than looking for relativistic quantum mechanics, we should actually look for quantum field theory. So here I will actually stop here. For example, if you put or use this Dirac equation in the central potential, right? Just like this, as a, for example, this hydrogen atom, electron is moving around this in the central potential. Then what we'll see is that the energy eigenvalues that we'll see, they will actually show fine structure. In Schrodinger equation, we had to introduce some correction terms to get this fine structure. But in the Dirac equation, if you just solve Dirac equation in central potential, automatically you will see the fine structure in the eigenvalue equation or in the eigenvalue spectrum. And also you can introduce this electromagnetic interaction with the electromagnetic fields by putting the gauge fields, as we have discussed for Schrodinger equation. In the same way you can do this. But all these things are actually more relevant for quantum field theory than the quantum mechanics. So I'll actually finish this lecture here, and hope you have understood the relativistic quantum mechanics, Klein-Gordon equation and Dirac equation. So if you have any question, please write me an email. Thank you.